Aloha, ahi ahi. Good evening and welcome. Whether you're here in person or via our virtually, we welcome each person attending this gathering in honor of Civil Liberties and the Constitution Day in Hawaii in 2026. My name is Ruth O, and together with my co-chairs Ryan Hamaguchi and Liam Skilling, on behalf of the Hawaii State Bar Association Civic Education Committee, we are so deeply honored to partner with the King Kamehameha V Judiciary History Center, as we have done every year since 2013. This year, we are also joined by our special co-sponsor, Hawaii Women Lawyers, as 2026 marks HWL's milestone 50th year anniversary. Before saying a few words about why we gather here around every January 30th for the past 14 years, please allow me a few moments to thank and acknowledge especially those individuals without whose dedication and efforts on programs would not make these evenings possible. From the Judiciary History Center, Executive Director Matt Matisse, Curator of Collections and Programs, Brianna Gouveia, and the amazing Judiciary History Center staff, Tai Samasama and Manoa Dela Cruz. From the Hawaii State Civic Education Committee, our current and past co-chairs and longtime members, including Ted Pettit, Troy Andrade, Jodine Arakaki, Sarah Ayabi, Rosanna Fukuda, retired Judge Leslie Hayashi, Carol Kitaoka, Susan Jaworski, Kim Torgoy, and Crystal Picheno. Just a side note, our new committee members are always welcome. And from our special co-sponsors tonight, Hawaii Women Lawyers, Tiara Nakata, Trisha Nakamatsu, Alana Picat Ricardo, Kimi Ide Foster, and also a big mahalo to HWL Law Student Organization members, our future lawyers, thus possibly the most important people at these events, including President Mariam Al-Amamari, Justine Kahau Olopua, Kay La Lo, Isabella Schmoker, and Michelle Fisher. Please join me in acknowledging and thanking all of these individuals. So why do we gather around January 30th every year at Aliʻiolani Hale? January 30th coincides with the birthday of US-born citizen Fred Korematsu, who challenged the constitutionality of imprisoning approximately 120,000 Japanese Americans and others in the United States. Fred's legal battles began after President Franklin D. Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066 on February 19th, 1942, more than 80 years ago. In 2013, Governor Neil Abercrombie signed into law and established January 30th as Civil Liberties and the Constitution Day in Hawaii. And so we, as planners of these events, affectionately refer to January 30th as Korematsu Day. On Korematsu Day in Hawaii, we celebrate and honor the courage, experiences, and stories of our trailblazers. We recognize brave individuals and community leaders who inspire civic engagement and conversation as pathways for addressing wrongs and making them right. Our program this evening brings together three inspirational trailblazers at the top of the legal profession in Hawaii. and lawmakers' roles in the judiciary, executive, and legislative branches. We look forward to them sharing their perspectives on safeguarding the rule of law, our civil liberties, and our fundamental values of democracy. Now I have the privilege of introducing tonight's moderator. We found him, or we so lucky he found us, when Troy Andrade was a law student at the William S. Richardson School of Law. Just a few personal notes, memories on his contributions. I still keep the beautiful commemorative poster he designed for our first Korematsu Day in 2013. Shortly after that, Troy and we at HSBA spearheaded efforts leading to President Barack Obama honoring our beloved Patsy Mink posthumously with the Medal of Freedom. In this very room, Troy helped us celebrate that occasion with a program honoring the 50th anniversary of Mrs. Mink's election to the House of Representatives. Congresswoman Mink's daughter, Wendy Mink, even participated and brought with her the Medal of Freedom for viewing at the reception downstairs in the Rotunda lobby. For over a decade, Troy continues to stay very close to our committee in developing meaningful civic education projects and programs, while we watch him becoming a beloved educator, prolific author, and insightful community builder and leader on topics of critical relevance to Hawaii. Please join me in welcoming our moderator, Associate Dean of Academic Affairs at the William S. Richardson School of Law, Troy Andrade.
Hi, aloha. Everybody doing all right today? I've never had an introduction like that. Thank you. It's truly a pleasure to be here to facilitate this panel discussion. Like Ruth, I'd like to extend my mahalo to this Civic Education Committee of the Hawaii State Bar Association, Ruth in particular, who's been leading these efforts for the last 13 years. I also want to extend my thanks to Matt Matisse and Brianna Govea for their work here at the Judiciary History Center. Also mahalo to Acting Chief Justice McKenna for allowing us to always use this space, and the Judiciary for allowing us to use this space to have these wonderful conversations. And finally, e hoʻomaikaʻi to Hawaii women lawyers, 50 years. Congratulations. I hope this marks the start of another incredible 50 years that you folks have been doing this incredible work. While we remember and celebrate the strength and tenacity of people like Fred Korematsu, Gordon Hirabayashi, Minya Sue, and Mitsuye Endo, I'd be remiss if I also didn't highlight the life and legacy of Congresswoman Patsy Takemoto Mink. So as we mentioned, we are in for a truly wonderful evening. Joining me tonight are three incredible humans who are in their own ways, like Patsy Mink, charting paths that are inspiring. They have all been deeply committed to public service and ensuring access and justice for everyone in our community, and are, from my perspective, the embodiment of everything Patsy Mink stood for. They will be sharing with us their thoughts on civil liberties and the Constitution. They also all happen to be leaders in our various branches of government. Now, I could probably spend the entire hour gloating about these three panelists, but I'll try to keep it very brief, and you have their bios in the program. We are fortunate to have Acting Chief Justice SABRINA McKenna here with us. Chief Justice McKenna, a nationally recognized jurist, brings a passion for Hawaii and public service through the various roles that she's taken on, including most recently, obviously, leading our judicial branch of government. She never hesitates to accept an invitation or opportunity to motivate and encourage others to pursue careers in law. We're also fortunate to have Vice Speaker of the State House of Representatives, Linda ICHIYAMA. Vice Speaker ICHIYAMA has long had a public service orientation and continues to help guide policymakers in some of the toughest political conversations Hawaii has faced. She is a leader that quietly makes significant impact. Finally, joining our panel is KALIKOʻONΑLANI Fernandes, who is the 5th Solicitor General of our state. During her tenure in the Department of the Attorney General, she has led the litigation efforts of the state on some of the toughest legal issues facing the community. She is a recognized expert and invaluable resource to Hawaiʻi. I have had the pleasure of knowing these exceptional folks for many years. One I admired since high school when she was a high school debater for that private school that a former president went to. Another was a year ahead of me in law school, and we all knew she was going to be somebody someday. And the third was one of those bonus mentors that you get when you clerk. I'll let you figure out who's who. But please join me in thanking our speakers for being with us tonight. So to get us started, we're going to give each of our panelists a few minutes to share some opening remarks. So we'll start with Justice McKenna.
Mahalo. Velina. Makamoku puni o Oahu I ka moku o kuna e ano ka koma a liʻiolani hale. Greetings. On the island of Oahu in the district of Kona, we are gathered here at a liʻiolani hale. Aloha ahi ahi. Good evening. It's wonderful to be able to be with you here tonight. And on behalf of the Judiciary, I want to thank the HSBA Civic Education Committee, the Judiciary History Center, and Hawaii Women Lawyers for organizing this event. And I'm really, truly honored to be able to join this wonderful moderator, Associate Dean Troy Andrade, as well as my friends, Representative, Vice Speaker Linda ICHIYAMA, and Solicitor General Kaliko Fernandes here today. And it's so wonderful to see so many familiar faces in the audience. And I know that there's some familiar people online too. So aloha to everyone.
Aloha.
So, today, actually tomorrow, Hawaii is going to be one of 7 states that celebrates Civil Liberties and Constitution Day. And the history of this day has been explained, but I also want to give a shout out to my friend, the daughter of Fred Korematsu, Karen Korematsu, who really was the person that spearheaded the recognition of Civil Liberties and Constitution Day now in 7 states. And it's really impossible to ignore the parallels between the injustices that Japanese Americans, as well as others, faced during World War II and what has been happening in recent years. And this day, tomorrow, reminds us that we have to continue to protect civil liberties and rights of all people now more than ever. So protecting these rights is part of the larger shared responsibility, kuleana, to uphold the rule of law. The rule of law is a principle that guarantees the law is applied evenly to everyone. And at the Judiciary, our mission is to administer justice in an impartial, efficient, and accessible manner in accordance with the law, which is a critical part of the rule of law. And at the same time, the executive and legislative branches, who are also represented here today, are also critical components to maintaining the rule of law in a democratic society. So, I want to talk to you about the rule of law and what it really means. In general, we tend to think about the rule of law as being, we enforce the laws and the Constitution as written. But the rule of law actually has a broader meaning. The World Justice Project defines the rule of law as a durable system of laws, institutions, norms, and community commitment that delivers 4 universal principles: accountability, just laws, open government, and accessible and impartial justice. These 4 principles together constitute the rule of law. So let me get into them a little bit more. Accountability, what does that mean? It means that the government, as well as private actors, are all accountable under the law. Just laws, means that the law is clear, publicized, stable, and is applied evenly. Just laws ensure human rights as well as property, contract, and procedural rights. Open government. The processes by which the law is adopted, administered, and adjudicated and enforced are accessible, fair, and efficient. And fourth, accessible and impartial justice. Justice is delivered timely by competent, ethical, and independent representatives and neutrals, judges, who are accessible, have adequate resources, and reflect the makeup of the communities they serve. So, you can see that the rule of law is not just enforcing the law as written. The law has to be fair and just, applied evenly, and judges must be able to maintain independence. Also, everyone should be equally accountable under the law. I think we are seeing examples where the rule of law is not being upheld in recent years. The World Justice Project evaluates how well countries around the world are adhering to the rule of law. And in the United States, last year, ranked 27th out of 143 countries. It's a notable decline from its ranking of 20 in 2015, and I would be shocked if it doesn't go down this year. In light of this decline and what has been happening on the national stage, we have to do better. And I'm hopeful that together we can and we will stand up for the rule of law and the rights and liberties guaranteed under our Constitution here at home. And as a step towards that, I'm incredibly proud that my colleagues and I at the Supreme Court last year issued a statement that reaffirmed our commitment to equal justice and the rule of law. And I'd like to end my opening remarks by sharing that statement. At the Judiciary, we are responsible for ensuring the promise of equal justice for all and upholding the rule of law for the people of Hawaiʻi. We take that responsibility with the utmost seriousness as we fulfill our mission to administer justice in an impartial, efficient, and accessible manner in accordance with the law. We strive to ensure that all people receive fair and respectful consideration in our courtrooms. We are guided by this work by the Aloha Spirit Law, Hawaii Revised Statutes, Section 5-7.5, which establishes that aloha means mutual regard and affection in which each person is important to every other person. These words define the shared vision for our state that we adopted as a people. Thank you, legislature. In alignment with this vision, the judiciary remains resolute in our commitment to increasing access to justice for all. To ensure fairness and provide a level playing field, we have removed barriers to access for individuals who cannot afford a lawyer, who have limited English proficiency, or who have a disability. We have also worked to eliminate bias within our own organization and collaborated with community partners to address inequities and provide for the fair administration of justice. Our goal is to maintain a judiciary that has the most qualified judges and staff who reflect the community they serve. This fosters an environment where persons from all backgrounds know their voices will be heard and their disputes will be resolved fairly. We reject any suggestion that programs that seek to welcome all people into our courtrooms and support all members of our workforce are in any way inconsistent with our national and Hawaii state civil rights laws. Rather, they protect against bias, allow each individual to be judged on their merits, strengthen our community, and enable us to live up to the promise of equal justice for all. These principles of justice and servant leadership run deep in Hawaii. In 1797, King Kamehameha I decreed the law of the splintered paddle, Ke Kanawai Ma Malahoe, that people, great and humble, should be respected alike, and that all people, including the elderly, women, and children, could lie by the pathways in safety. Equality before the law has long been a guiding principle in Hawaii. It seeks to elevate all people by recognizing their common humanity and eliminating the barriers that keep them from fully participating in society. It is a message that remains as important today as it was in 1797 and will always continue to guide the work we do at the Hawaii State Judiciary. Mahalo for allowing me to address you at the opening, and I look forward to our continued discussions.
Representative ICHIYAMA?
CJ, that's a hard act to follow. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much to our sponsors for hosting this event and for allowing us to be here. Thank you so much for everyone who's come here tonight to share some time with us. So I am a state representative for Salt Lake and Moanalua. I currently serve as the vice speaker in the House of Representatives. I have a little bit of a different take on civil rights and the Constitution, I think, than CJ, because I'm coming from a different perspective of a different branch. And so when you ask me the question of, how does the state respond to federal government, federal policies, I look at it in a very different way. And so I'll give you a couple of examples of that. But one of the biggest examples I can give you is our state budget. So we have a state budget of roughly $20 billion that funds all of our programs, our agencies, social services, safety net, schools, and roughly 20% of that, $4 billion, is federal funds. And right now, those federal funds are a big question mark in our state budget. And that directly affects what we have to do as a legislative branch, as the appropriating authority that passes the state budget. We are required under the Hawaii State Constitution to pass a balanced budget every year. And so if we have, a puka of somewhere between $1 and $2 billion of federal funds that we're not going to be receiving anymore, we have to ask ourselves some really hard questions and really come together and figure out what are our priorities, what are our needs, what's nice to have, what do we want to have, and to have those hard conversations with each other as colleagues in the House and Senate, but also in community as well. I think that's also why we have to take a hard look at our tax structure. And Governor Green, in his State of the State, has suggested that we re-examine the historic tax cuts that were passed so recently in 2024, in large part because of this uncertainty that's been created at the federal level. And not just in terms of federal funds, but the federal decisions that affect our economy overall, and whether that's tariffs or economic policy, interest rates, these are all affecting us here in Hawaii on a very real level. So that's one example of how we at the legislature look at impacts of federal policy. Another example was just last October during the federal shutdown, when at the end of September, the federal government said, we are no longer going to cover food stamps, SNAP benefits for states, where in the past, during previous shutdowns, they were able to tap into an emergency reserve and continue to make sure that families are able to get the food assistance that they need to take care of themselves and their families. And so we had to work collaboratively with the executive branch to figure out a plan of how do we feed thousands of Hawaii families who rely on their EBT card that's going to be balance zero come October 1st. So we quickly had to respond and work and come up with a plan. We came up with an emergency relief program to try to meet as much of the need as possible. We worked with our food banks across the state. We also were able to award $50 million in grants and aid to many nonprofits that had their federal funds frozen or taken away, or the portal was open and then it was closed. But those are some of the real impacts that federal policy has that we've had to address. And then finally, I'll say, just because the legislative session is starting now, we're seeing a lot of bills, proposals for legislation that are in direct response and reaction to what's happening at the federal government. So we have many bills that are looking at immigration enforcement. What is our responsibility, or what limits are we going to put on our cooperation with law enforcement at the federal level, the state and the county level? Should we have spaces where we are saying there should be no enforcement action, like hospitals, churches, schools, so that people can receive the services, basic services that they need? So we even have bills that are, interestingly, freezing certain federal laws as of January 1, 2024, right? So as the federal position on things like clean water or clean air or the EPA swing radically, we are now being asked at the state level to take on that federal responsibility to create those same protections in state law that used to exist at the federal law. So those are just some of the examples and ways in which this session we're going to be asked to deal with some of the challenges of the changes at the federal level. But I look forward to the discussion tonight. So thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. Mahalo.
So 2 tough acts to follow, but aloha kako. I'm honored to be with you all today, joined by such esteemed panelists. And I'd like to thank everyone who spent their time and energy to put this together, and all of you for coming here and spending your evening with us. So I'll just put in my little note at the outset that I'll touch tonight on things I've done in my professional capacity, but I'm here as myself. My comments are my own, and I'm not intending to speak on behalf of the Department of the Attorney General or the whole executive branch. Now, as your programs indicate, Civil Liberties and the Constitution Day is meant to celebrate, honor, and encourage public education and awareness of the commitment of individuals to preserving civil rights and liberties for all citizens. And many of us likely feel right now at this moment that reflection on these topics is crucial. That we can't at this moment shut our eyes and take things for granted, because the rule of law and the foundational principles of our system of government are being tested, severely tested. We need only look to what has happened in Minnesota. So in my role at the Department of the Attorney General, I've been privileged to be part of a litigation team that at this point has 39 affirmative lawsuits against the Trump administration. And underlying this effort is the goal of protecting the rights enshrined in the Constitution, in statute, in other words, protecting the rule of law, its promises, and its responsibilities. So in this challenging time, I'm grateful to have this conversation, to come together as a Hawaiʻi community to think about how the federal government is affecting us and how we can move forward. So thank you.
So we're going to dive really deep into the work that each of you folks do, but I wanted to start off with a little more of a historical question. So Executive Order 9066, I think we're all familiar with that law, and Fred Korematsu's case, obviously, and it was mentioned several times, is still relevant to the discussions that we're having today. What responsibilities do you think history places on us as citizens in moments like this? So as an example, Fred Korematsu, he spoke out, right? When everybody else was telling him no, right? He couldn't get an attorney to represent him. The ACLU said no. Japanese American Citizens League said no. And there was an attorney in, I can't remember which specific office in California that said, okay, I will represent you, right? But there was a moment where Fred had to speak out. What does that look like in practical terms today in civic life? How do we manifest that for some of our folks here?
Well, I guess I'll just start by saying that, as judges, we're bound by a code of judicial conduct, judicial ethics. We've had a code of judicial ethics for many, many years, and it's actually enforced. And so we are prohibited from commenting on pending or impending cases. So cases that are pending, publicly commenting on cases that are pending, or impending, which means cases or legal issues that are likely to arise. So we speak in terms of general statements like the one we issued last year, and we speak through our cases. we speak through our case law, the cases that are brought before us, our decisions is how we speak. In terms of our rulings, however, we are constrained by our adversarial system that generally requires us to consider the issues that are brought to us before our court. Our courts in the United States, the common law jurisdictions are somewhat different from some other jurisdictions, such as South Asia, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. They have what they call suo motu jurisdiction, which means that the court can say, we see something happening in the country or in the community, and we think that this is an issue that needs to be addressed. So here is the legal issue. Attorney General, we appoint you to argue one side, and we appoint this attorney to argue the other side, and the argument is set for this certain date. The Supreme Court of India does this fairly regularly. We can't do that. We decide cases that are brought to us. And this is something that my colleague, Justice Todd Edens, who is here today, we speak a lot about this. We're co-teaching state constitutional law at the law school, and this is our third year doing so. And we tell our students that there are so many issues under the Hawaii Constitution or under Hawaii law that have yet to be addressed. And it is up to advocates to raise the issues to us, to the court, so that the court can address them. Another way in which we address issues that may not have been addressed is the plain error doctrine, where we see an issue that has not actually been argued by the attorneys. We passed a rule several years ago that says that if we notice an issue of plain error that has not been briefed by the parties, before we can address or rule on such a basis, we shall provide the parties with the opportunity to provide supplemental briefs on the issue. So we have been doing that fairly regularly, ordering supplemental briefing on issues that we see that were not raised by the parties. But let me just note that sitting judges are constrained in terms of speaking out, but retired judges are not. And we're very proud of our former Chief Justice, Mark Rechtenwald, who is now a leader in a group of retired Chief Justices called the Alliance of Former Chief Justices. It's affiliated with an organization called Keep Our Republic. And these former Chief Justices are now speaking out loudly in conjunction with other like retired federal judges, retired trial court judges from other jurisdictions about protecting the rule of law and the independence of the judiciary. That's how we speak out. Thanks.
How does speaking out, how does that manifest itself for the legislature?
We speak a lot. We're the opposite of the judiciary. But I think what has changed in more recent times is, and especially with passing legislation, is the fear of retaliation. And there's actually litigation going on right now in the mainland about whether or not it's legal for the federal government to withhold funds from sanctuary states or sanctuary cities or whatever that definition is, right? And so that threat of, having your federal funding cut off and losing your programs, right, has never been so, what's the right word? So bold, so apparent than with this administration. And so I think it adds another layer for us to think about. But I would also say that for me as a legislator, whenever I have to make a decision or make a tough call, it comes down to, will I be able to look myself in the mirror at the end of the day? Can I explain to my constituents why I thought this was right, why I thought this was fair? And I think for a lot of legislators, they are really feeling that what is happening is not right, it's not fair. And a lot of folks are speaking up about that.
How about at the AG's office?
Sure. So, I mean, in terms of speaking out, I guess the way we're speaking out is sort of what I had mentioned. We now have a fair number of affirmative lawsuits against the administration, ranging all sorts of topics. I can get into more as they may relate to further questions, but the first was on birthright citizenship. That was one of the first things that this administration did when it took office. We filed a lawsuit the next day, along with other states and jurisdictions, saying that it was a blatant violation of our Constitution. So, I mean, that's one of the ways we speak out. There are also a lot of other ways, like amicus briefs that get filed in cases that are not our own, but that we're trying to support other parties, things like comment letters, other letters to various officials. So that's the primary way we go about things. But, I think for all of us, right, this isn't anything particularly profound, but we have to think about the ways that we can speak out, the difference that we can make. I think one of the things that my boss, the Attorney General, has said a few times that's really had an impact on me, that is in challenging times, like think about how you can help someone, even if it has nothing to do with maybe what you think is directly related to the federal action. Like a lot of our most vulnerable people in society are suffering. And how can you help them? Whether that's an example my boss gave was like, read to kids more, do things like that, just anything that can sort of make a positive difference in someone's life.
Great advice. Maybe Rep. ICHIYAMA, we can go back to you. With all of the changes that are happening in federal policies and, drawing the line here, maybe not go into a civics lesson, but maybe go into a little bit of a civics lesson. How is it that the legislature can respond? How quickly or not can the legislature respond to these rapidly changing policies on the federal level?
That's a great question. Probably not as fast as we'd like. So we're right now at the beginning of the legislative session, and we're in session from January through May. And so we can take up bills, but sometimes we also can shine a light. And sometimes that in and of itself is helpful. And we did that a number of times through the interim, where we were not in session, having informational briefings on topics like the rule of law, the effects of certain Supreme Court decisions, or on immigration enforcement. We held those kinds of informational briefings to help the public be educated and understand the issues that are going on. So the bills that are introduced now in the House and Senate will be referred to committee. I encourage all of you to visit the Capitol website, capitol.hawaii.gov. It's a new and improved search function. So if you want to do a keyword search for any topic that's of interest to you, it makes it easier to find bills, track them. It's super easy to log in and sign up to testify. And testimony is as easy as basically you're writing an email, or you just click support or oppose. But that input and feedback from the public is really important. And if you're able to share a story or a personal experience, that's even better. It helps us make better decisions and helps us really get the input that we need when we're considering legislation.
Kaliko, if I can jump to you really quick. I know you're not alone. There are other states that are taking action. Can you talk a little bit about the efforts that your office has had with other states or other jurisdictions?
Absolutely. So we're definitely not alone. There's a coalition of states that has been doing this work over the past, actually, it started before January 2025, but at least over the past year or so. And I think that's been one of the nice things about doing this work, is getting to know folks from other states in similar roles. There's always some multi-state work that goes on with an AG's office, but generally never like this. This is the most we've had, I think, at least in my history at the department. So to give you a sense of it, AG staff that's part of this group meets every single day. And so every day we talk about what has happened, updates in our cases. Should we, this happened. What do you folks think? Our agency is reporting this. Is anyone else experiencing that? So that's a daily exercise for us. There are also times when the attorney generals themselves from various states will get together and talk about similar issues. And
part of what I think has made our endeavor successful is being able to pool resources. I think as probably all of us have seen it, you know, there's a lot that happens and it's not always expected. And it you know, it's at times felt like the strategy was to just crowd the field. And that can strain people's resources and attention. So it's nice to have the collective resources of about, 23 AG's offices behind us to get this work done.
Great. CJ McKenna, from your perspective, having been right now the longest serving Associate Justice, right, on the court and now acting Chief Justice, what challenges have arisen when state courts have to interpret or apply new or changing policies, be it federal or state policies?
Well, I think it's really much more the changing interpretations of the United States Constitution that has been quite interesting, we think, setting aside and overruling precedent. I just want to make sure that everyone understands that in addition to the federal Constitution, each state has its own Constitution. And we have a wonderful Constitution in the state of Hawaii. And there's a lot of civil rights and civil liberties written, or even criminal defendants' rights written into the federal Bill of Rights, as well as the state Article 1, which contains the rights of the people, rights of individuals. What's really important is that state courts are free to interpret their constitutional provisions, as well as statutes that might have the same language as federal statutes, differently. We're not required to follow the United States Supreme Court's interpretation of what due process means, or what the right against unreasonable search or seizures means, and or what the right to bear arms means. We are free to interpret our Constitution depending on what we think the voters intended and what the state constitutional amendment is supposed to mean in the state of Hawaii. And the Hawaii Supreme Court has been doing that since 1967, very, very early, 8 years after statehood. This court was recognizing that we had the prerogative to do that and started doing that. And so therefore, I want people to be heartened that a lot of the decisions coming out of like SCOTUS or whatever, we're not bound by these. We are bound, but if it's relating to a right, we can give greater rights under the same language under the state constitution. And what our court often does is we interpret cases. And in 2024, in Justice Eden's State versus Wilson opinion regarding the right to keep and bear arms, we adopted what we call the primacy approach to constitutional interpretation, which means that we interpret the state constitution first. And if a person prevails under the state constitution, we don't even address the federal constitution. And that's the same for the state laws. We can rule based on the state law and not even address the federal law. Of course, if the federal law or constitution requires a certain floor, we have to consider it. But in general, we rule based on the state constitution and state law. And under SCOTUS precedent, a case called Michigan versus Long in 1983, if there is an independent and adequate state law ground for a state court decision, there's no further appeal to the United States Supreme Court. So we do that all the time, and we interpret our laws and our Constitution independently. And so that's, I guess, a way in which we may be responding to decisions that we may not agree with.
All fascinating. Yeah, fascinating things. To step away from your specific positions in your own kind of departments, are there ways in which you folks could talk about the ways that you interact with the other branches within the state? Examples that you've collaborated on things either in response to federal policy changes or in general that have uplifted the community?
I'll go first because I've worked actually with these both wonderful women on separate and different occasions. So I've been privileged to be on several panels with Justice McKenna on Title IX, and we've done a lot of talking about Title IX and making sure that women have equal opportunity in education. But now in her new role as CG, I get to work with her on bills relating to administration of justice, making sure our courts have the resources that they need, or even really particular and little nitty-gritty issues like how are we helping to protect domestic violence survivors, making sure that the laws that are there to protect them are working the best way that they can. And so that's really a good, close working partnership that we have. And then I get to work with Kaliko. Actually, we've been working a lot together on draft legislation. The Attorney General has been a great resource for coming up with ideas, especially where we're in this kind of weird place where we're like, what can the state do that goes right up to the line of not violating the Constitution or the federal preemption, but goes right up to that line? And right, so we're very fortunate to have the smart attorneys at the AG's Department of the Attorney General to help us navigate these kind of uncharted waters where we've never had to think about that before. Of how do we exert our state's rights under the Constitution?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Can I mention one more thing? And there's, in terms of interpreting our law and our Constitution, there's a federal law called the Posse Comitatus Act, which says that the U.S. military cannot basically says U.S. military cannot engage in state law enforcement. And this court is the only court that I'm aware of in the country that has ruled that under our state constitution's due process clause, if a federal investigation or arrest takes place in violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, we apply the exclusionary rule and we do not allow that evidence to be admitted into evidence. So we are a state that really, under the state constitution, enforces the Posse Comitatus Act.
Learn something new every day. I love it. Okay, I'm going to change the topic. Just, Kaliko, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, go ahead.
Change the topic just a little bit. Obviously, we have three amazing women here who have done incredible things, and there's so much more that they are doing. We have 50% of our judges are now women. We have the Women's Legislative Caucus.
We're not 50%. Right. Just in case anyone wanted to know.
To what extent, or maybe you can talk through and share the ways in which a woman's perspective in these positions help to shape policymaking or decision-making in your respective roles. Kaliko, we'll start with you.
Sure. I mean, some of what I think about that question is just eminently obvious to me, so it's hard to articulate. But I think as Justice McKenna's comments at the beginning highlighted, it's important to have our institutions reflect the community they serve. And, that's, I think, creates stronger institutions, institutions that lead to better outcomes, and also just lends legitimacy to the work. If you have a body that just does not seem to be representing your interests, you're not going to feel very connected or have a lot of faith in that. So again, like I said, I think to me those are eminently obvious principles, but it is important. I'm proud to be a woman in a position of some, I don't want to say power, because I don't know that that's true, but just just in a position and to be working with a woman attorney general, who I also know cares very deeply about these issues, and they welcome your folks' thoughts.
I do think, it was a Patsy Mink. Well, everybody says that personal is political, right? And so, we were talking about domestic violence. Domestic violence wasn't even a crime 50 years ago. Really? This is the effect of Title IX. Just remember, in 1972, when Title IX passed, only 7% of U.S. law school graduates were women. Less than 3% of the bar was women. They don't even have the numbers. It was well less than 3%, right? 1972, we had one woman judge in the state of Hawaiʻi, Betty Matusik Family Court, right? Now we have over 50% women judges. We don't have 50% women legislators, but there's a lot of women legislators, and I don't think domestic violence would have been treated like the crime that it is unless we had all of these women entering the legislature and passing laws that's, treated. And look at the focus on human services now within the legislature, right? It's the issues that affect the daily lives of people. And so the personal is political. That is why it's important to have leaders that reflect the makeup of the communities they serve, because different people bring different perspectives to the table, and all perspectives are important.
Oh, I agree with all those sentiments. I'm so excited that last year the House of Representatives elected our first female speaker, and now we have our first female CJ. So, I think having women in these leadership roles is important because it also shows the next generation that these jobs are for you, right? And they see see someone that looks like them in these roles. I think that's what's really important. And in the legislature, I don't have to explain to my women colleagues why childcare is essential. You just don't have to go through that to explain why we should have free preschool, public preschools, right? How that helps families. It just takes that whole explanation part out, and they're just like, yeah, got it, can do. So it does make a difference.
Thank you. We're going to go back to the Constitution, the Hawaii State Constitution, and the laws of our state. Justice McKenna, you had referenced the law of the splinter paddle, the Aloha Spirit law. These are values that are sort of enshrined on principles of the Hawaiian culture. To what extent, is the Hawaiian culture an aspect of the work that you folks do in your particular roles?
Tremendous, I believe. I think we are guided. Justice Edens and I talk about the preamble to the Hawaii State Constitution. We talk about, the preamble talks about this being an island state. And we're the only constitution that talks about divine guidance, not God or Almighty God or the Supreme Leader. We talk about divine guidance. We're a pluralistic society. And the Constitution preamble ends with Ua Maokea Aina Ika Pono. And we have cited that in some of our opinions, saying this is simply not pono. We try to be pono in the way we deal with each other in this state. And Justice Edens, State versus Wilson, other opinions we cite to the Aloha Spirit law. We are guided by Hawaiian values, by the indigenous peoples here, the Aloha Spirit, what we have learned, to be in one with nature, to respect nature, to respect the aina. These are very, very important values. And as you noticed, unfortunately, I do not speak Hawaiian. I don't really know Olelo Hawaii, but it is another official language, right? So we have taken to opening court in Hawaiian. We have taken to having a bilingual letterhead and name cards and, email signatures and everything. We're trying to incorporate a little Hawaii into our work as much as we can, unfortunately. And I do look forward to the day that Hawaiian is spoken in court again. I think that will happen. It's going to happen. I actually happen to sit as a substitute justice, a justice pro tem for the Supreme Court of the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. And that is what I do as my pro bono work. I go to Saipan for oral arguments. And, their trial courts, they're speaking Chamorro. The judges and the litigants are speaking Chamorro. And it's in their official language, right? And all the judges understand Chamorro. Someday that's going to happen in Hawaii also.
Sure, I guess I can say a bit more, but, I think Justice McKenna has so capably covered the field. But, there's some unique or relatively unique provisions in our Constitution, and some of which that immediately come to mind. We have, traditional and customary rights, type of protections, right to a clean and healthful environment. So, as I mentioned before, much of my past year and my team's past year has been spent on federal litigation, but in normal times, a significant and not primary part of our caseload are state appeals and appearing before this court, not oftentimes on constitutional issues. So I think it's a really fascinating area, and there's a lot, as Justice McKenna highlighted, that the court has said in their opinions to, in response to specific state constitutional protections and state laws, that if you're interested, I encourage you to take a look.
I would just add, last year, the House of Representatives adopted a statement of shared values for all 51 members. And our first value is that we serve with aloha. And we want to make sure that how we conduct ourselves in hearings, on the floor, in the community is always the spirit of aloha. And as CJ mentioned, honoring that in our HRS. But that is very much a part of what we do. And Olelo Hawaii is the only other language than English that can be spoken on the chamber floor.
Awesome. Related to that, what you just said, Rep. ICHIYAMA, aloha is very much a part of aloha is very much civil engagement with each other. Anybody want to speak to sort of the state of civil engagement in the nation, in Hawaii, and ways in which we could challenge what I think some folks might see as uncivil engagement when it comes to really tough decisions?
I think Hawaii has a lot to teach the rest of the country. I'll just start there. But, it reminds me of this documentary that was made about Reverend Akaka going up to Washington, D.C. And he took with him a delegation of people from Hawaii, because at the time, the issue of the day was racial segregation. And he took a multi-racial ethnicity group up to the Capitol to meet with Congress people to show them the aloha spirit, that in Hawaii, we do this. That's our normal. And so I think we just need to continue to do that and show the world that even in a place that's diverse and multicultural in Hawaii, we all make it work.
Any other responses to that one? Okay, so I am going to preface this final question from me by saying I hope you all have questions ready to go, because you're going to have an opportunity to question our panelists. But I guess my final question for you folks is, no doubt these are tough times. Hawaii, The United States has been through tough times in the past. Any advice you have for community members here on how to stay grounded or how to deal with everything that's coming our way all the time? Sorry, no easy questions.
If someone could tell me how to do that.
That was exactly my reaction. It's like, far be it from me to tell everybody how to handle these times. Is I think that's something that, the folks that are, those of us who are concerned about what is happening are struggling with is what do we do about this? And how do you show up for other people, pay attention to what's happening, take that all in while not just kind of losing your mind a little bit. So I don't know that I have any great advice. What works for me is my son. He's 6 years old. If the world feels overwhelming, or I'm stressed, and I have a lot going on, I just look at his face and that helps me recenter. So that's the only tiny piece of thing that I can offer.
For me, actually, it's kind of similar. I have a picture of my kids in my office. But I think it's reflecting on what we have to be grateful for. Practicing gratitude. I'm so grateful to live in Hawaii. So grateful to be part of a community that's caring and compassionate. I'm so grateful to have the privilege of serving our state. And so that's what I try to do, is have that practice of gratitude when things seem overwhelming and unbelievable. But it's hard. It's tough. And then I think that's where we all need to support each other and help each other.
Yeah, it's really, I think, do little things one day at a time, I think, and keep your sanity, though. I think you have to take care of yourself, but I don't think we can afford to just close off what's happening. And I think it's good to be in places like this, to be around like-minded people, and to, practice gratitude and be thankful for what we have. But I think we have to be positive, but we have to take action. We have to take action, but we have to stay positive. And I'm not sure. I don't think I've seen anything like this in my lifetime, and I think this is worse than McCarthyism, but I'm reminded that we had, Executive Order 9066 in July 17th of 1942, and we had McCarthyism, and we've had some terrible things. So I think we just have to keep speaking out. But it is important to take care of yourself while you do it too. And lucky we live Hawaii.
All right. Any questions from the crowd? Yeah, right in the front here. We're going to bring a microphone to you so that folks at home on Zoom can hear the question.
I'm curious, Justice McKenna. I understand that ICE has been lurking around the state courts, ready to arrest people. How do you guarantee access to justice and ke kanawai mama lahoi if our state courts are really not open and safe for people to come and receive justice? That bothers me. Are you going to mobilize your state sheriffs to ban ICE people from coming?
There have been arrests outside our courthouses. There has been one arrest within a courthouse. We are not able to exclude people from the public areas of our courthouses. We have an understanding and agreement that ICE does provide us with notice if they're planning to come outside and arrest someone outside the courthouse. It has happened several times over the course of the past year, but it is nothing. It's less than, less than 10 people for sure. And it's not what's happening in like sweeps of other places. And what they have been doing is keeping track of people that have been charged with crimes. And so far, they have not come after witnesses or people that are in court for civil proceedings. That, I think, would be a different bridge. So at this point, nothing has happened recently, but I do not think that we have legal authority to tell people that they cannot. Right now, we do not have the legal authority to say they cannot come into our courthouses or that they cannot search our legal files, because everything is electronic now and people can seek information regarding other people's criminal cases. That's the reality.
You have a question up here?
Sorry, so to kind of follow up on that, I know the legislator is looking at a lot of bills this session to combat ICE and what they've been doing in other states. So if you guys were able to pass a law that gave the courts the authority to block ICE from doing enforcement actions in the court, how realistic is it to enforce that against federal agents?
I'm looking at my attorney.
Like what it basically...
We pass the laws.
I have to give you what's going to be a very disappointing answer, which is that I'm bound to only provide legal advice to state actors and cannot provide legal advice or that answer that kind of question to the public. I'm very sorry.
It's one that we're struggling with, though, right? Because we can pass no secret police. We can pass safe spaces. But at what point does the federal preemption sort of just override all of that, I think, is a question that we're wrestling with.
Revolves around that $4 billion, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right behind. You mind passing that right behind?
Aloha. Justice McKenna, you talked about, the state constitution in many cases overriding the federal actions. I'm particularly interested in how could Hawaii prosecute ICE agents if they were to harm or kill, as they have in Minnesota, local people?
I would ask the Attorney General that.
I'm unfortunately going to have to give you the answer. I just gave. I mean, I think the kinds of issues that you folks are highlighting, I can't really directly answer your questions, but the kind of questions you folks are answering, I think a lot of jurisdictions are wrestling with. There's some states and cities that have the so-called sanctuary policies. Some of them, the current federal administration has a certain view of the breadth of their federal authority and what they view states as being required to do in terms of cooperation or providing information. A lot of states, at least the kinds of ones that I work with on a daily basis, have a different view of that. I'm sure that there are various court cases that have dealt with that principle, but, some of the issues you folks are highlighting are very much, on the forefront of people's minds, and we'll have to see how things turn out.
Some of them are also being litigated today, like in courts across the country, right? If the federal government demands all of our MedQuest applications, are we as a state required to turn that in for Medicaid applications or food stamp applications? Are we required to turn that over? And so there's lots of litigation around what kind of data sharing we have to do with the federal government even.
Yeah. Those are the kind of pending or impending cases that judges cannot publicly address.
Troy, we have a question that's come on from Zoom, actually, in reference to the historical experience you shared about Mr. Korematsu having difficulty finding representation. And this individual asked, there are many people within our community who still experience difficulties obtaining legal representation. Have there been additional resources or options
for legal counsel since then, or given recent violations of civil liberties that people maybe aren't aware of or could be overlooking?
So Hawaii has been under, initially with Chief Justice Moon, and then under Chief Justice Rechtenwald's leadership, implemented our Access to Justice program, which is this commission that's been put together that is really looking at providing legal services to folks. And that's been a wonderful, wonderful, valuable asset for the community to provide legal representation. In terms of what's happening on the ground today, and in response to the federal action, I think there are nonprofit legal organizations that are mobilizing for sure. I know in the immigration context, for example, the immigration law clinic at the Richardson Law School has been extremely busy fielding calls from folks. And I know that there are others. The legal clinic also provides, has been inundated with calls. So there are a lot of folks that are helping out. Obviously, from my perspective, resources are thin. And more resources could be put into those areas, but that's me not speaking on behalf of the law school, on myself.
So the legislature did appropriate additional funds last year through the judiciary and through our grant and aid process to legal service providers to help those low-income individuals who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford an attorney to help them ensure access to our court system.
Yes, and we do have, for like the Hawaii Supreme Court or the appellate courts, we have an appellate pro bono project. And, we have a lot of pro bono attorneys that appear on the civil side to help self-represented litigants that are filing appeals. And we recently had one where an attorney appeared on behalf of a self-represented litigant in this court. And for the first time, we even had an interpreter interpreting for that client, for that litigant. But I will tell you that we are very concerned about the actual pending decline in the number of attorneys. We have an aging bar. Over 40% of our bar is over the age of 60, and the number of attorneys coming in is not matching the number of attorneys going out for retirement. And so Justice Edens will be co-chairing a task force to look at delivery of legal services and how we might be able to expand the availability of legal services to members of the public.
I want to pick up on a question that Troy posed about engagement, because the rule of law depends upon public support. Chief Justice understands that the court can issue a decision, but doesn't have any army to enforce it. We depend upon public acceptance. Courts generally depend upon public acceptance. And we're in an era when the economics of journalism have seriously disrupted the ways that people get information. The rise of social media has increased pretty substantially the volume of information being disseminated from sources that might be described as unreliable. And there are affirmative efforts to inject unreliable information. The public seems further removed. I came to Hawaii in 1975, and Hawaii was proud of having the highest voter turnout in the country. We don't anymore. The vote by mail, albeit under attack from the current administration, but has helped some, but we still have a problem because not many elections are competitive. And if you have a state that's essentially a one-party state, which most of the country now is now, that doesn't eliminate politics, it pushes behind the curtain. So the public feels disengaged in not knowing, okay, I'm going to vote for this state senator, but if the state senate reorganizes, where does that senator lie in things? That's not public information. And civics classes and civics education have waned. I really appreciate the efforts of the court with their courts in the community to try to engage people and inform students about what goes on and actually bring to them real cases. But it's an uphill battle. in that environment where people don't feel as engaged, how do we try to turn the tide or bring more people to make them aware of the problems? I mean, frankly, I'm as concerned as everybody else about the past year. It's that kind of environment that runs the risk of some true departure from the kind of democratic system we want to have. So what are things that we can do very much on the personal level to try to bring things back so people don't feel as far removed from the judiciary and the rule of law? Simple question, so a couple of minutes should do it, right?
Real simple question. Judge Clifton of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Thank you. Thank you. Very simple question. But, you know, you're absolutely right. We're, in addition to courts in the community, my colleague Justice Lisa Ginoza is helping head the Civics Education Commission, and we're doing justice academies at various public high schools throughout the state. We're trying to engage students as much as possible. We have thousands of students that come to our courthouses every year that we make sure that we have judges there to speak to them. But yeah, I think we need to get out more into the schools and into the communities, and we need the young people. And, you know, I mean, the 70s, it was the universities that led, right? Where are the young people leading on the protests in the universities, right? Yeah. Come on, Troy, lead a protest at the university. The law school should be leading protests at the university.
So that is a great question, right? What other
It's an easier question than answer.
Right.
And I understand that.
Right. So what other efforts on the civic education front can you folks think about to help get students, but even just the general community? Because, in my perspective, having worked on the civic education, there's actually a lot of efforts that are going on in schools. The big gap is with the rest of the community who don't necessarily have opportunities like this to be engaged in conversation.
I think we all need to get on Instagram, and I'm not going to do it right now, but I do think that we need more people using social media. I mean, that's where people are getting their information now, right? So we need to be on social media providing the information. I don't mean me, I mean people that can help educate need to be on social media.
Okay, I'm going to take moderator's privilege and we're going to close this up. I haven't prepped the speakers for this one.
Oh, there's a question back there.
Oh, we got one more question. Okay, we'll do one more question in the back there.
Thank you for your guys' time. Thank you for this conversation tonight. So I work with kids. I've been a teacher at a school for 9 years. Before that, I was at another school. So just to answer, social media is a great option. And this last year, as someone who uses social media, I've seen way more attorneys, people just speaking privately, sharing law, civic information and stuff like that. So it is happening. And I was fortunate to join a program through the Civic Center for Education this summer. So my goal is that, yes, most of our kids in my elementary school have no idea how government works, right? So we're working on understanding what the words are, right? Legislature, what is legislature? What are the branches and how do we work with them? How do we bring them concerns or suggestions? So that's something I really, for me, is really important. And so I guess in my back of my mind, my pocket, I'm trying to raise advocates and abolitionists. We're not gonna tell everyone that, but it's kind of in my mind, we need people to know how to fight, right? How to stand up. So my question is actually more about the Hawaiian perspective, because actually I'm an INA teacher now, so everything we do relates to culture. And so my goal is we can teach them civics and give them some tools to fight for what is important for them. And I think what makes me nervous, I do a lot of nonprofit work. I have friends with Native Hawaiian organizations. I think it makes me very nervous right now that the government has said, if you're anti-American, which to me, if you stand up for anything of Hawaiian history, sometimes that could be viewed as anti-American, right? If you talk about sovereignty, which is a real, issue, or the annexation of Hawaii, that is true history. So my concern is, like, as these changes come down from them, which seem very biased, how do we protect ourselves, or can we come to legislatures to create protections for teaching this stuff, or for letting our kids still voice concerns that might be related to culture or historical land issues or whatever it is, right? So my question is, whether it's through courts or education or legislature, is there a legal pathway, or are there legal tools that our kids or neighbors or families could learn that could kind of help protect those people? I have friends who run an organization that's donated millions to Native Hawaiian organizations over the years. They are so afraid to do their work now that they're going quiet. They're gonna just work all old school now, just old school. No, not much public stuff. They're pulling off of social media. And so I guess this big bubble of, culture for me is kind of nerve-wracking. Like, do we still hold on to those things and fight for the, kuleana lands? Do we still, what is, that environment just makes me really nervous. So I'm, if there's things we can do legally, or if there's legislation we can propose to protect or help mitigate the future challenges in that arena, just something to think about. And if that's something we haven't thought about, maybe we can start preparing for those boxing rounds, I guess, as well.
I think that's probably a good question for the Board of Education, because they really set the curriculum and specific content standards, right, that all schools have to teach to. But I do know that as a graduation requirement for all of our public high school students, they have to take 1 semester of Hawaiian history, right? So I think at the legislature, what we try to do is to support the Department of Education to make sure that they have the resources that they need for, like, Kaiapuni Hawaiian immersion schools, right? So that our teachers have the resources that they need, whether it's Hawaiian history or social studies or civics, math, science, what have you. They have what they need to help their students succeed.
Yeah, as a judge, I'm not in a position to give legal advice or speak about pending or impending cases, but I would say, yes, keep teaching and keep speaking up. I mean, last year, in terms of the day after the president designated English as the official national language, we issued a statement reaffirming our commitment to providing language access to our courts. And we talked about Olelo Hawaii as a state official language, and we reaffirmed our commitment. Chief Justice Rectenwald said respect for Olelo Hawaii is a core value of the Hawaii Judiciary. And we talked about all the resources that we dedicate to provide language access services. I think this is a part of the Hawaii Constitution. Teaching about Hawaii and teaching Hawaiian is a part of the Hawaii Constitution. Our court has reaffirmed that in a case called Clarabelle versus Department of Education. We said that the DOE has to make all reasonable efforts to provide Hawaiian language immersion programs on all islands, right? So I think, I think we can continue to be proud of our Constitution and our laws, and we please do not succumb to fear. You got to take care of yourself, but that's the tactic. It's always about fear. That's what the terrorists did in 9/11. They tried to scare us into not flying, right? It's about fear. So it's hard, but don't be afraid.
And if I could add on to that too, I think everyone has a role to play in your own way. I was just talking to some friends, and people are taking Hawaiian language classes, right? Never took Hawaiian before, but want to learn more. From my perspective, if you understand the language, you understand the worldview, the perspective, you have a deeper respect for Aina and its resources. As a law professor, I get to teach students about Hawaiian history, about Hawaiian law. And I get to write articles that then get cited, thanks Justice Edens, in Hawaii Supreme Court opinions, right, about Hawaiian history, right? You have teachers who are out there working with organizations like the Civic Education Committee, working to create lesson plans to incorporate the latest and greatest that we're learning about the past, right? So everyone, lawyers can volunteer in schools, and whether it's Hawaiian issues or civic education in general, everyone has a role to play in their own way, right? And it could be just hanging out with your kids and teaching them at home sort of the basics of government, right? Having a conversation with them after you watch a little bit of the news and everybody's sort of freaking out about what's happening in the world, right? Everybody has a role to play. And if we all can play that role in our little ways, I think, someone said it earlier, right? It's the little things that I think will chip away at all of the big things. And then you have amazing leaders like these folks who are actually doing the big things that really, really make everything happen, right? But we all have a special role to play.
And I also want to let you know that you probably know this, but through our Judiciary History Center, we do have a speakers bureau, and, we can send judges out to the schools to speak to the schools, etc. So please feel free to contact us.
Thank you for the question. Okay, I have the last question for our panelists. One word to describe what do we do next? Probably the hardest question for the night.
One word.
One word to describe how you would approach what's ahead for us.
Imua.
Oh, that's a good one. I'll co-sign that one.
Ditto.
Ditto. Okay.
Keep fighting.
Keep fighting. Imua. So please join me in thanking our wonderful panelists. And I have been told that the museum downstairs is open. There will be refreshments in the rotunda. Please help yourself. If you want to eat, you can eat in the courtroom downstairs, but don't take your food elsewhere. There's a special exhibit that is just up called Relics of War. There's a nice little bookmark that talks about it a little bit. But thank you all so very much for coming. And once again, if you can join me in thanking our incredible panelists.